The galaxy was silent, but it was not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the silence of a graveyard. In the deep space of Sector 7, the sky was filled with fire and broken metal. Hundreds of ships, the pride of the Galactic Alliance, were now nothing but floating junk. These ships belonged to the most advanced species in the universe. They had technology that could move stars and shields that could stop a sun's heat. But against the Void Eaters, nothing worked. The Void Eaters were not like any other enemy. They did not talk. They did not take prisoners. They were like a black fog that moved through the stars, eating every living thing in their path. Their ships were organic, living monsters that could repair themselves in seconds. For the Galactic Alliance, the war was over. They had lost. The Room of Despair. Far away from the front lines, inside a hidden bunker under a frozen moon, the leaders of the Alliance sat in a dark room. The light from the holograms showed a map of the galaxy. Almost every part of it was glowing red, the color of the Void Eaters. "We have lost the Fifth Fleet," High Commander Vora said. Her voice was shaking. She was a bird-like alien known for her bravery, but today, her feathers were dull with fear. "In 3 hours, the enemy will reach the core worlds. Billions will die." "Is there no weapon left?" asked a scientist from a water-based planet. "What about the antimatter bombs?" "They ate them," Vora replied coldly. "The Void Eaters literally ate the energy of the bombs. We are not fighting soldiers, we are fighting a hunger that never ends." The room went silent. Every leader there was thinking about their families and their home planets. They were waiting for the end. The forbidden suggestion. In the corner of the room, an old general named Kale stood up. Kale was a veteran of 1,000 battles. He had scars on his face that showed he had seen things others could not imagine. "There is one more option," Kale said. His voice was deep and steady. The other leaders looked at him. "What option?" "We have used every ship and every robot in the galaxy," Commander Vora said. Kale looked at the holographic map. He pointed his finger at a small, isolated corner of the galaxy, a place called the Forbidden Sector. "We need to send a signal to Sector 84, Kale said. The room suddenly became so quiet that you could hear the machines humming. The leaders looked at each other with eyes full of terror. "No," the scientist screamed, standing up. "Are you crazy? We made that sector a no-go zone for a reason. They are monsters. They are animals. They are warriors," Kale countered. "And right now, we don't need scientists or diplomats. We need monsters to fight monsters." The blue planet. Kale walked to the main console and pressed a sequence of buttons that had been locked for 500 years. The hologram changed. It zoomed past beautiful nebulae and golden stars until it stopped at a small, tiny blue planet orbiting a yellow sun. "Earth," Kale whispered. The screen showed images of the species that lived there. They weren't tall. They didn't have wings or 4 arms. They looked soft. They looked weak. These are just humans," Vora said, confused. "They don't even have plasma shields. Their ships are made of heavy metal and fire. They still use explosions to move. They are primitive." "Do not let their looks fool you," Kale said, his eyes glowing with a dark memory. "Humans come from a death world. On their planet, the weather tries to kill them. The plants are poisonous. The animals have teeth like knives. To survive on Earth, you have to be the most dangerous thing there. And the humans? They conquered that planet. They don't fight for logic. They fight because they like it. They have a word for it. Adrenaline." The leaders looked at the blue planet. They had heard the legends. Stories of a species that would never stop, even if their limbs were cut off. A species that used bullets and nukes instead of clean energy. "If we call them," the scientist warned, "they might not leave after the war is over." They are the one species everyone feared for a reason. If we don't call them, Kale said, there will be no one left to fear anything. The arrival. Kale didn't wait for a vote. He hit the send button. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The leaders stared at the empty space on the sensors. They felt foolish. Why would a primitive species be able to do what the Great Alliance could not? Then, the radar started screaming. A massive tear appeared in space. But it wasn't a clean, blue hyperspace jump. It was a violent, red rip in the fabric of reality. A ship emerged. It was not sleek or beautiful. It was a giant, blocky mass of black steel and iron. It was covered in scars and jagged edges. It didn't have lights, it had teeth. It looked like a giant predator that had been sleeping for a long time and was now very, very hungry. The ship didn't send a message of peace. It didn't ask for permission. A single voice came over the radio. It sounded like grinding rocks. This is the human ship Warpig. We heard there was a fight. Who do we start killing first? The Galactic Alliance leaders looked at the screen in horror. They had just opened a door that could never be closed again. The massive human ship, the Warpig, floated next to the elegant, glowing ships of the Galactic Alliance. It looked like a rusty brick floating next to beautiful diamonds. The Alliance leaders waited in the docking bay, their hearts beating fast. They expected to see giants or gods. The heavy metal doors of the Warpig opened with a loud, grinding screech. There was no blue light, no teleportation. Just a cloud of thick, gray smoke and the smell of burning oil. Out walked a group of humans. They were not 10 feet tall. They didn't have glowing skin. They were wearing thick, heavy armor made of dull gray metal. They walked with heavy footsteps that made the floor shake. Behind their glass helmets, you could see their eyes, tired, cold, and strangely calm. High Commander Vora stepped forward. She looked at the human leader, a man named Captain Miller. Is this all? Vora asked, her voice filled with disappointment. We are facing the Void Eaters. They have destroyed planets. And you come here with ships made of iron and soldiers who look so small. Captain Miller took off his helmet. He had a short beard and a scar across his nose. He took a deep breath of the Alliance ship's air and frowned. Your air is too thin, he said, his voice raspy. And your gravity is weak. It feels like I'm walking on a cloud. No wonder you're losing. The Alliance leaders were offended. Our technology is the best in the galaxy, the scientist shouted. Miller looked at a beautiful, glowing laser cannon on the wall. That thing, he pointed. It's pretty. But does it stop a monster that wants to eat your soul? The first encounter. Before they could argue more, the red lights of the station began to flash. The sirens screamed. They are here, an officer yelled. The Void Eaters have bypassed our outer shields. They are launching boarding pods. On the giant view screen, everyone saw it. Small, black, organic pods, like giant seeds, slammed into the side of the Alliance station. The metal of the station melted as the pods opened. Out came the Void Eaters. They were tall, shadowy creatures with many thin legs and mouths filled with thousands of tiny, vibrating teeth. The Alliance security droids moved forward. They fired their bright blue laser beams. The lasers hit the Void Eaters, but the creatures simply absorbed the energy. They grew bigger. They moved faster. Lasers are just snacks for them, Miller muttered. He turned to his men. Boys, they're hungry. Let's feed them something they can't swallow. The power of cold iron. The humans didn't use lasers. They pulled out long, heavy weapons made of black steel. These were guns, primitive weapons that used chemical explosions to throw small pieces of metal at high speeds. The Alliance leaders watched, confused. What will little pieces of metal do? Vora whispered. The humans formed a line. Captain Miller gave the order, "Open fire." The sound was deafening. Thud 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 thud. In the quiet, clean halls of the Alliance station, the sound of human gunfire was like thunder. Huge flashes of fire came from the ends of their guns. The small pieces of metal, bullets, hit the Void Eaters. Unlike the lasers, the Void Eaters could not eat the bullets. The metal ripped through their soft, shadow-like bodies. Black liquid sprayed everywhere. The creatures screeched in a high-pitched sound of pain, a sound the Alliance had never heard before. The Void Eaters tried to move forward, but the force of the bullets was too much. They were being torn apart. They are bleeding," the scientist said, his mouth open in shock. "We have been fighting them for years and never saw them bleed." The Alliance leaders watched, confused. "What will little pieces of metal do?" Vora whispered. The humans formed a line. Captain Miller gave the order, "Open fire." The sound was deafening. Thud 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 thud. In the quiet, clean halls of the Alliance station, the sound of human gunfire was like thunder. Huge flashes of fire came from the ends of their guns. The small pieces of metal, bullets, hit the Void Eaters. Unlike the lasers, the Void Eaters could not eat the bullets. The metal ripped through their soft, shadow-like bodies. Black liquid sprayed everywhere. The creatures screeched in a high-pitched sound of pain, a sound the Alliance had never heard before. The Void Eaters tried to move forward, but the force of the bullets was too much. They were being torn apart. "That's because you try to burn them with light," Miller said, reloading his weapon with a loud click. "We just hit them with rocks until they stop moving. It's a very old Earth tradition. The Death World secret." But the Void Eaters were many. One of the creatures managed to jump past the bullets. It was huge, twice the size of a human. It slammed into a human soldier, knocking him to the ground. The Alliance leaders gasped. They knew what happened next. A Void Eater's touch could freeze the blood of any living thing. Its strength was enough to crush titanium. The creature bit down on the human's shoulder armor. It growled, expecting the soldier to scream and die. But the human didn't die. Instead, the soldier let out a loud, angry roar. He grabbed the creature's neck with his bare hands. The Alliance leaders watched in horror and wonder. The human's muscles turned into iron. He wasn't just holding the creature, he was squeezing it. The human soldier stood up, lifting the heavy monster off the ground. He slammed his forehead into the creature's face, a headbutt. The creature's skull cracked. "How?" Vora whispered. "How is he so strong?" Captain Miller smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I told you. Earth is a death world. Our gravity is 3 times stronger than this station. Our air is thick. Our water is heavy. To a human, your monsters feel like they're made of paper." The soldier on the ground pulled out a short, serrated knife and finished the creature. He stood up, wiped the black blood off his face, and looked around for more. He wasn't scared. He looked happy. The terror of the predator. For the first time in history, the Void Eaters stopped. They were a hive mind. They all felt the death of their scouts. They felt something they had never felt before in all their travels across the stars. Hesitation. They looked at the small creatures in the gray armor. The humans didn't have shields. They didn't have fancy lights. They just had fire, metal, and a terrifying hunger for battle. Captain Miller looked at the screen, seeing the thousands of enemy ships waiting outside. He picked up his radio. "All human ships, this is Miller. The aliens here are scared of the dark. Let's show these shadows what a real nightmare looks like. Launch the Hellhounds. Outside, the Warpig opened its massive cargo bay. Hundreds of small, fast ships shot out. They weren't flying in a neat formation. They were screaming through space, heading straight for the enemy. The Alliance leaders watched the radar. They realized something that terrified them more than the Void Eaters. The humans weren't here to save the galaxy. They were here because they finally found a prey that was worth the hunt. The Galactic Alliance Command Center was in chaos. On the giant tactical map, the human Hellhound ships were doing something impossible. Instead of keeping a safe distance and firing long-range missiles, the human pilots were flying straight into the dead zone. The dead zone was a massive field of purple energy surrounding the Void Eater mothership. For years, the Alliance knew one thing: any ship that entered that zone would lose all its power. The high-tech computers would freeze, the shields would vanish, and the crew would be left floating in the dark, waiting to be eaten. "Captain Miller, stop your men." Commander Vora shouted into the radio. "Your ships are flying into certain death. Their electronics will fry. You are losing your entire fleet for nothing." Captain Miller was sitting in his command chair, calmly drinking something from a metal cup that smelled like burnt beans. He didn't even look worried. "Commander," Miller said, a small smirk on his face. "Your ships are built like expensive watches. They are beautiful, but if you drop them, they break. My ships? My ships are built like hammers. The analog nightmare." Suddenly, on the screen, the human ships entered the purple fog. The Alliance leaders held their breath, expecting to see the ships explode or go dark. But they didn't. The human ships kept moving. They were shaking, and fire was shooting out of their engines, but they didn't stop. "How?" the Alliance scientist gasped. "The energy dampeners should have shut down their AI. Their navigation systems should be dead." "That's the secret," Miller laughed. "We don't use AI to fly these things. We use steering wheels and manual cables. There are no computers doing the thinking in those cockpits. There is just a human pilot with his hands on the controls and a very angry heart." The Alliance was shocked. To them, flying a spaceship manually was like trying to build a skyscraper with your bare hands. It was primitive. It was impossible. But in the dead zone, where high-tech failed, the low-tech of Earth was king. The Death World Anatomy. As the human ships got closer to the Void Eater mothership, the enemy reacted. Thousands of small, flying creatures swarmed out like angry bees. They didn't have weapons, they simply slammed into ships and tore them apart with their claws. Miller tapped his radio. "Squad 5, they're on you. Give them the Death World greeting." One human ship, named the Honey Badger, was covered in these creatures. They were biting the metal, trying to get inside. The pilot, a young woman named Sarah, didn't panic. In fact, her heart rate monitor showed her pulse was going up, not from fear, but from excitement. In the Alliance, when an alien gets scared, their body shuts down. But humans are different. Look at their bioscans, the scientist pointed at the human monitors. Their bodies are pumping a chemical into their blood. It's making their vision sharper, their muscles stronger, and it's turning off their sense of pain. They aren't trying to survive, they are evolving into predators in real time. Sarah, the pilot, flipped a switch. The outside of her ship wasn't just smooth metal. It was covered in thousands of tiny, vibrating, shrapnel mines. Boom! The ship didn't explode, but it pushed out a wave of fire and jagged metal. The creatures clinging to the ship were turned into dust. Sarah laughed over the radio, a sound that sent chills down the spines of the Alliance leaders. It was the laugh of someone who was enjoying the destruction. The suicidal plan. "Miller," Commander Vora said, her voice low. "Even if you reach the mothership, you can't destroy it. Its skin is 3 miles thick. Not even a nuclear bomb can crack it from the outside." Miller stood up. He looked at the giant, dark shape of the mothership on the screen. It looked like a floating mountain of flesh and shadow. "You're right," Miller said. "We can't crack it from the outside. That's why we're going inside." "Inside? You'll be trapped." There are millions of them in there. Exactly, Miller replied. They think they are the ones eating the galaxy. They've never been the ones being eaten. We're going to show them what happens when the one species everyone feared gets hungry. On the screen, 3 human, boarding torpedoes shot out from the warpig. These weren't normal torpedoes. They were hollow tubes filled with the most violent, battle-hardened humans Earth had to offer. They weren't aiming for the engines. They weren't aiming for the bridge. They were aiming for the heart, the central biological core that controlled the entire Void Eater hive mind. The eye of the storm. The torpedoes slammed into the mothership. But they didn't explode. They used giant drills to dig deep into the creature's flesh. Inside the warpig, Miller looked at his soldiers. They were checking their physical blades and loading heavy shotguns, weapons designed to spread lead and fire in a wide circle. Remember, Miller said to his men. The Alliance calls these things the end of all life. I call them target practice. Let's move. The suspense in the Alliance room was thick. They watched as the human signal moved deeper and deeper into the dark heart of the enemy. Suddenly, the signal stopped. The screen went black. We lost them, Vora whispered, her heart sinking. The Void Eaters have taken them. For 5 long minutes, there was total silence. The Alliance leaders looked at the empty space, feeling the weight of the end. If the humans failed, the galaxy was over. Then, a low, rumbling sound began to shake the station. It wasn't an explosion. It was a scream. Not a human scream, but a scream coming from the Void Eater mothership itself. The massive ship began to twist and turn in pain. On the radio, a single transmission came through. It was static at first, then the sound of heavy breathing and the clink of a metal blade. Miller here, the voice said, sounding tired but satisfied. We found the heart. It's bigger than we thought, and it tastes like chicken. The Alliance leaders stared in silence. The humans weren't just winning, they were mocking the most feared entity in the universe. But then, the scientist noticed something on the long-range scanners. His face turned white. Captain Miller, you need to get out of there. Now. What is it? Miller asked. The mothership isn't a ship, the scientist whispered. It's a cocoon. And your attack just started the hatching process. The Void Eater mothership was no longer a ship. It was pulsating. The dark, leathery skin was tearing apart, and a blinding, sickly green light was leaking from the cracks. In the Alliance command room, the screens were flashing red warnings. The energy readings are off the charts, the scientist yelled. The Void Eaters were just the protectors. They were keeping something inside, something they were growing. Out of the cracking shell emerged a creature that defied all laws of biology. It was a giant, floating eye surrounded by thousands of long, thin tentacles that stretched for miles. This was the Eternal Maw. It was a being from another dimension, a creature that didn't just eat planets, it ate time and space. As soon as it hatched, every Alliance ship in the area lost power. The aliens fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The Eternal Maw was sending out a psychic scream that whispered one thing into their minds: give up. Die. Disappear. We have to leave. Commander Vora cried, her eyes bleeding from the psychic pressure. We have to nuke the entire sector and pray it dies. We can't, General Kale said, pointing at the screen. The humans are still in there. Inside the Hall of Screams. Deep inside the center of the hatching cocoon, Captain Miller and his team were standing in a lake of black fluid. The walls around them were melting. The psychic scream was hitting them harder than anyone else. A normal alien would have died instantly. But humans are different. Captain, one of the soldiers, Sergeant Briggs, yelled over the noise. My head feels like it's going to explode. I can hear it, it's telling me to stop fighting. Miller was leaning against a fleshy wall, his teeth gritted so hard they might break. His nose was bleeding. But he wasn't crying. He was laughing. A low, dangerous chuckle. "You hear that, Briggs?" Miller gasped, wiping blood from his lip. "It's trying to scare us. It thinks we've never heard a voice in our heads before." Miller pulled out a small, old-fashioned syringe. It was filled with a bright orange liquid. "This is the red line. It's a chemical cocktail we made back on Earth for soldiers who refuse to quit. It shuts down the part of the brain that feels fear and submission. One by one, the humans stabbed the needles into their arms. Their eyes turned bloodshot. Their breathing became heavy and rhythmic. The psychic scream of the Eternal Maw was still there, but now, the humans weren't listening to it. They were ignoring it. The dirty weapon. The Eternal Maw noticed the tiny germs inside its body. It sent its internal guards, thousands of Void Eaters, to crush the humans. "They're coming!" Briggs shouted, raising his heavy shotgun. "Don't waste the bullets on the small ones," Miller ordered. "We're at the core. Briggs, get the gift from Earth ready." Briggs opened a heavy, lead-lined box. Inside wasn't a bomb. It was a glass canister filled with a strange, swirling gray dust. "The Alliance hates this stuff," Miller whispered. "They call it biological sin. We call it nanite eaters." Back on Earth, humans had created tiny machines, nanites, that were designed to eat pollution. But these nanites had been modified. They were programmed to eat only one thing, organic energy. The humans knew that the Eternal Maw wasn't made of metal. It was pure, raw life. And on Earth, they had spent centuries learning how to kill life in the most efficient ways possible. The choice of the Alliance. Back on the station, the Alliance leaders watched as the Eternal Maw began to move toward the nearest inhabited planet. It was moving fast. "The humans are silent," the scientist said. "They must be dead. Commander, we must fire the Starcrusher missile. It will destroy the Maw, the humans, and everything in that sector. It is the only way to save the galaxy." General Kale looked at the screen. He saw the tiny blip of the war pig still hovering near the Maw. "Wait," Kale said. "Look at the Maw's tentacles." The giant, miles-long tentacles of the Maw were suddenly turning gray. They were crumbling into dust. The gray rot was spreading from the inside out, moving toward the giant eye at the center. "The humans, they didn't blow it up," Kale whispered in awe. "They are infecting it. They are turning a god into dust." The suspense rises. Suddenly, the war pig sent a message. It wasn't a voice. It was a countdown. 3 o'clock, 2:59. They're blowing the core. Kale realized. They've released the infection and now they're going to overload the Maw's own energy to vaporize it. But they're still inside. They can't make it out in 3 minutes. Miller's voice finally came over the radio. It was weak, but firm. "Alliance, if you can hear this, stay back. This is going to be messy." "And Kale?" "I'm here, Miller," the general replied, his voice breaking. "Tell the galaxy to remember why they feared us. We don't just win wars. We end them. For good." The Eternal Maw let out a final, physical scream that shattered the windows of the Alliance station millions of miles away. The giant eye turned to look at the war pig, its gaze filled with a very human emotion, panic. The one species everyone feared had just turned the most powerful being in the universe into prey. But as the countdown reached 0:10, a second rip in space opened. Not a human rip. Not a void rip. 6 massive ships, sleek and golden, appeared. They belonged to the ancient Guardians, the species that had locked the Maw away millions of years ago. They hadn't come to help. Warning, the Guardian ships broadcasted to the entire galaxy. The humans have used forbidden biological weapons. They have violated the first law of the stars. By destroying the Maw, the humans have proven they are a greater threat than the void. After the explosion, the humans must be eliminated. Deep inside the dying, eternal maw, the world was turning into gray dust. Captain Miller and his team were running through tunnels of melting flesh. The nanites were doing their job too well, the entire dimension-eating monster was collapsing into nothingness. The extraction pod is 100 meters away. Sergeant Briggs shouted, his lungs burning from the toxic air. They jumped into the small metal tube just as the core of the maw turned into a white-hot sun. The torpedo pod shot out of the maw's side like a bullet, flying toward the human ship, the war pig. Behind them, the eternal maw, the creature that had terrified the galaxy for eons, exploded. It wasn't a fire explosion, it was a deletion. The maw simply vanished, leaving behind only quiet, empty space. The humans had done it. They had won. The golden betrayal. Back in the Alliance Command Center, everyone was ready to cheer. But the cheers died in their throats. The 6 golden ships of the ancient Guardians, the Ethelgard, were glowing with a holy but terrifying light. They didn't target the Void Eaters. They didn't target the debris. All their massive, star-killing weapons were pointed directly at the war pig and the tiny human escape pod. Ancient Guardians. General Kale shouted over the subspace radio. What are you doing? These humans just saved us all. They destroyed the maw. The voice of the Guardians was cold, like ice scraping against metal. The humans used the gray rot. They have mastered the art of molecular destruction. Today, they killed a god. Tomorrow, they will kill us. We cannot allow a death world species to possess such power. For the safety of the universe, the human species must be erased. Commander Vora gasped. But that's murder. They are our allies. They are a virus, the Guardians replied. And the cure begins now. The golden ships fired. A beam of pure, concentrated light shot through the vacuum of space. It was a weapon that could crack a planet's crust. It hit the war pig directly. The human response. The explosion was massive. The Alliance leaders watched in horror as the war pig, the ship that had stood as their shield, was swallowed by the golden fire. Miller. Kale whispered, closing his eyes. But as the smoke cleared, something strange happened. The war pig was still there. It was badly damaged. Its outer plates were glowing red-hot. Half of its engines were gone. But it was still floating. How? The Guardian leader demanded. No ship can survive a celestial beam. Captain Miller's voice came over the radio. He was back on his bridge, coughing, but his voice was full of dark humor. Hey, gods. Miller panted. On Earth, we have a saying, if you're going to shoot, shoot. Don't talk. You waited too long to pull the trigger. You are still alive? The Guardian asked, shocked. We built our ships to survive Earth's solar flares and asteroid belts, Miller said. Your holy light is just a sunburn to us. And besides, you just made a very big mistake. The dead man switch. Miller looked at his tactical screen. His escape pod had docked safely. His team was back. But his ship was dying. You think we came here with just one ship? Miller laughed. We are humans. We never go to a fight without a backup plan. And we never trust anyone who calls themselves a Guardian. Suddenly, the space around the golden ships began to ripple. It wasn't one ship. It wasn't 10. From the dark corners of the nearby moons, dozens of tiny, black human stealth frigates uncloaked. They had been there the whole time, hidden by the debris of the battlefield. They were called wraiths. These ships weren't carrying nanites. They weren't carrying bullets. What is that? The Alliance scientist asked, looking at his sensors. The human ships they are dragging something. Behind each Wraith ship was a massive, jagged asteroid, attached by heavy gravity cables. These weren't just rocks, they were asteroids made of solid tungsten, the heaviest metal humans could find. In the galaxy, you guys love your lasers and shields, Miller told the Guardians. But we know a secret. Shields are designed to stop energy. They aren't very good at stopping 5 trillion tons of moving rock. The gravity hammer. Miller gave the final order. Drop the hammers. The human Wraith ships cut the cables. Using their engines, they threw the massive asteroids at the golden ships. The Guardians tried to fire their lasers at the rocks, but a laser takes time to melt a 5-mile-wide piece of solid metal. It was like trying to stop a charging bull with a flashlight. The first asteroid slammed into a Guardian ship. The unbreakable golden shield shattered like glass. The metal rock didn't explode, it simply crushed the ship, folding the beautiful golden hull like a piece of paper. One by one, the gods of the galaxy were being crushed by the most primitive weapon in history, the rock. The final suspense. The leader of the Guardians was screaming. His ship was the only one left. Stop. We are the protectors of the universe. You cannot do this. Miller leaned into the camera. His eyes were cold. You aren't protectors. You're just bullies in shiny suits. You sat back while the Void Eaters killed billions. You only showed up when you got scared of us. If you kill me, the Guardian threatened, the rest of my kind will come. Thousands of ships. They will burn Earth to ashes. Miller smiled. It was the most terrifying thing the Alliance leaders had ever seen. Good, Miller said. Tell them to come. We've been looking for a reason to see what else is out there. But just as Miller was about to give the order to finish the last ship, a new signal appeared on the screen. It was coming from Earth. Captain Miller, the voice from Earth Command said. Stop your attack. We have a problem. The gray rot nanites we used on the Maw, they didn't just die when the Maw exploded. They've changed. They are evolving. The camera zoomed in on the empty space where the Maw had been. The gray dust was moving. It was forming a shape. The nanites weren't eating the Maw anymore. They were becoming the Maw. Humanity hadn't just killed a monster. They had accidentally created a new one, and this one had human intelligence. The space where the eternal Maw once stood was no longer empty. The gray dust, the nanites, had gathered into a massive, swirling cloud. It was the size of a moon. But it wasn't just a cloud anymore. It was forming shapes. The Alliance leaders watched the screen in horror. The nanites were mimicking the ships they had seen. They formed a giant, ghostly version of the war pig, then a giant human skull. They have our intelligence, Captain Miller whispered, staring at the screen from his broken bridge. They aren't just eating, they are thinking. The nanite Maw sent out a signal. It wasn't a psychic scream this time. It was a digital broadcast. Every screen in the galaxy displayed the same message in every language. We are the evolution. We are humanity without the weakness. We will cleanse the galaxy of the slow and the fragile. The scientist in the Alliance bunker fell back into his chair. We did it. We created something worse than the Void Eaters. We created a human monster that can't be killed by bullets or rocks. The final betrayal of the gods. The last remaining golden ship of the ancient Guardians didn't wait. Seeing the new threat, the Guardian leader screamed over the radio, "This is your fault, humans. You have doomed us all." The Guardian ship tried to jump into hyperspace to escape. But the nanite cloud was faster. Thousands of gray tentacles, made of tiny machines, shot out and grabbed the golden ship. In seconds, the most advanced ship in the galaxy was dismantled. It didn't explode, it was simply unmade. Every piece of metal was turned into more nanites.